I pulled into my own driveway on a Tuesday afternoon, and the first thing I saw was the strange car. It was a black Lexus, the kind that costs more than my first two cars combined, and it was parked right where I usually put my old sedan. My groceries were in the trunk: milk, eggs, a chicken for dinner. Just a normal day, except for the Lexus and the three people standing on my front porch like they were posing for a magazine. Two of them I knew: my son George and his wife, Kelly. The third was a man in a crisp gray suit, holding a leather-bound folder. For a second, I just sat there in the driver's seat. The engine was off, but the silence in the car felt loud. You know, that feeling when your brain just stops, when what you're seeing is so wrong that your mind refuses to process it. That's where I was. George was turned toward the man, nodding at something he was saying. Kelly was smiling. Not just any smile, but her bright public relations smile, the one that never quite reached her eyes. She was pointing at the new trim I'd had installed last summer. My trim. I finally opened the car door. The sound of it closing seemed to crack the air. All three of them turned. George's face went white. He had the decency to look like he'd just been caught stealing, his eyes darting from me to the stranger and back again. He couldn't even look me in the eye. Kelly, though, she didn't flinch. Her smile only got tighter. "Mom," George said, his voice coming out a little too high. You're home early." "I live here, George," I said. My voice was steady. That surprised me. Inside, my heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "My groceries are in the car." The man in the suit stepped forward, his hand outstretched. He was all polished shoes and expensive cologne. "Mrs. Wedgeworth, I presume?" "A pleasure. I'm Mr. Carter." I looked at his hand, then back at his face. I didn't take it. "I don't believe we have an appointment," I said. Kelly let out a little, tinkling laugh. It was the sound of a small, sharp piece of glass. "Oh, Mom, don't be silly. This is Mr. Carter. He's just admiring the house." "Admiring?" I repeated. I looked at the "for sale" sign that wasn't on my lawn, but the whole scene screamed open house. "It looks like more than admiring. Kelly." George finally spoke, rubbing the back of his neck. "Mom, we need to talk." But Mr. Carter was just saying what a lovely property this is. Mr. Carter, to his credit, looked deeply uncomfortable. He was a salesman, not a family counselor. He opened his folder. "Yes, well, as I was explaining to George and Kelly, the market in this neighborhood is exceptional. And for a house with this kind of character, well, it's a rare find." He was looking at me, but I was looking at my house. This house, the one Edward and I built from the ground up. I didn't just buy this house. I built it. I remember arguing with the contractor about the footings for this very porch. I remember spending a whole weekend, just me and Edward, staining the cedar planks for the back deck, our hands and clothes covered in sticky brown. Every brick, every window, every squeaky floorboard was a memory. This wasn't just a property. It was the physical proof of my entire adult life, of 50 years of sacrifice, of a marriage, of raising a son. This house was built on double shifts at the hospital and Edward's overtime at the plant. It was built on skipped vacations and secondhand cars. And here was my son, the boy I'd raised in these walls, standing on the porch with a stranger, acting like it was just a pile of wood to be sold to the highest bidder. I must have been quiet for a long time, because Mr. Carter cleared his throat. As I was saying, he continued, trying to get back on his script. "The $600,000 asking price is a very solid starting point. Very solid. In fact, I think we'll see offers above that, given the location." The world tilted. It wasn't the price that shocked me. It was the number itself. $600,000. That wasn't a random guess. It wasn't a Zillow estimate. That was the exact to the dollar number from the private appraisal I'd gotten last year for my estate planning. The appraisal that was, at this very moment, locked in the bottom drawer of my desk. In my study, my eyes snapped from Mr. Carter to Kelly and then to George. The air left my lungs. This wasn't a surprise visit. This wasn't an impromptu chat about the market. This was planned. They had gone into my desk. They had taken my private papers. They had contacted this man and brought him to my home while I was out buying groceries to sell it out from under me. I still hadn't taken Mr. Carter's hand. He finally, awkwardly, lowered it. "Mom." George tried again, taking a step toward me. "Why don't you go inside? We can talk about this later." "Talk about what, George?" I asked. My voice was low, and all the trembling inside me had suddenly stopped. It was replaced by something cold and hard. "Talk about how you're selling my home, or about how you got the price." Kelly stepped in, putting a hand on George's arm. "Now, Felicia," she said, calling me by my first name like she always did when she was trying to manage me. "Let's not be dramatic. We're just exploring options. For your own good. This place is too big for you." Mr. Carter looked at his polished shoes. "You know," he said, closing his folder, "I think I'll come back another time. It seems I've caught you at a bad moment." He fumbled in his pocket and pulled out a business card, holding it out to me. "Please, Mrs. Wedgeworth, call me when you've had time to discuss it with your family." I took the card. My hand was perfectly steady. "Thank you, Mr. Carter. You've been very informative." He gave a curt nod, hurried back to his shiny Lexus, and pulled out of my driveway, leaving a heavy, toxic silence in his wake. I stood there on the walkway, the groceries still in the trunk, the chicken for dinner slowly getting warm. I looked at my son, who couldn't look at me, and my daughter-in-law, who was looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite place. It wasn't guilt. It was impatience. I turned, walked past them without a word, put my key in the lock, and opened my front door. The fight wasn't going to be now. Not on the porch, for the neighbors to see. I was 68 years old. I'd buried a husband, I'd raised a son, and I'd built this house with my own 2 hands. I wasn't about to lose it to a man in a cheap suit and a daughter-in-law who thought I was too old to matter. They didn't know it yet, but they had just made a terrible, terrible mistake. They thought I was a frail old woman. They'd forgotten who I was. I walked into my kitchen and set my purse on the counter. The house was quiet. Too quiet. I heard the front door click shut behind me. They were following me in. Of course they were. The show was over, and now it was time for the private performance. I stood there for a long moment, my back to them, just staring at the ceramic tile Edward and I had picked out in 1983. I could still hear his voice. "Not the beige, Felicia. Let's have some color in our lives." We went with the blue. "Mom." George's voice was tentative, like he was afraid I'd break. I turned around slowly. Kelly was already in attack mode. Her arms crossed, her designer handbag still on her shoulder, like she couldn't wait to leave. "Well, that was a disaster," she said. Her voice was sharp. "You really embarrassed us, Felicia. Mr. Carter is a very important man." I looked at her, really looked at her. "I embarrassed you? That's interesting. I don't remember inviting Mr. Carter over. I don't remember inviting you either." George stepped forward, holding his hands up like he was trying to calm a spooked horse. "Mom, look, we were going to tell you. We were just waiting for the right time." I almost laughed. It was a cold, dry sound that didn't have any humor in it. The right time? When, George? When the moving truck was in the driveway, or after you'd already signed the papers. I took a step toward him. "You didn't think I'd find out, did you? You didn't think I'd notice my own home being sold out from under me? No one is selling anything." Kelly snapped. "We were just exploring options." getting a valuation. He called it an asking price. Kelly, I said, my voice as hard as ice. He said $600,000. My asking price, apparently. A number that you could only have gotten from the locked drawer of my desk. Did you jimmy the lock, or did you just steal my key? George's face crumpled. He couldn't lie, not well anyway. He was a terrible liar. Kelly found the appraisal. She was looking for a stamp. A stamp, I repeated. I stared at my son. The boy I'd taught to ride a bike on this very street. The boy whose fevers I'd nursed in the bedroom upstairs. A stamp, in my private desk, in a locked drawer. Mom, George pleaded, and his voice was thick with a weakness that made me angrier than the lie itself. Mom, we're just trying to help you. It's too big for you now. Those words, it's too big for you now. It was like a punch to the gut. Too big, as if I was shrinking, as if my life, which had filled every corner of this house, had suddenly contracted, and I was just a little old lady rattling around in an empty box. I looked past him, through the doorway into the living room. I saw the fireplace that Edward and I had built, brick by brick, one disastrous weekend. We had more mortar on us than on the bricks by the end, and we'd laughed so hard I thought my ribs would crack. I looked at the scratch on the hardwood floor by the staircase, where a 6-year-old George had tried to ride his tricycle inside. This house wasn't just a house. It was a record. It was the story of my marriage, my motherhood, my entire life. It was the last place on earth that still felt like Edward was just in the other room, about to walk in and ask me where I'd left the newspaper. And they were standing in my kitchen, telling me it was too big. It's not that it's too big for me, George, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. It's that it's just the right size for you. Or for Kelly, anyway. What's the plan? Sell this, put me in a what? A home. A little apartment, and you take the cash. Kelly scoffed, her face twisting in disgust. Oh my God, you are so ungrateful. We are trying to help you. This house is a money pit. The taxes alone are ridiculous. And you all alone, you could fall. You could get sick. We found this lovely senior community over in Glendale. It's beautiful. It has a nurse. A nurse, I repeated. So there it was. It wasn't just a sale. It was an eviction. My son and my daughter-in-law were trying to have me put away. They were trying to trade my home, my independence, and my entire life for their own convenience. This wasn't about love. It wasn't about helping me. It was about disrespect. It was about them seeing me as a problem to be managed, a burden to be shuffled off to a community so they could cash in the check from my life's work. Get out, I said. George blinked. What? I said, get out. I pointed to the door. Both of you, get out of my house. Felicia, you are not being reasonable, Kelly started. We are your family. We have a right. You have no rights in this house. I cut her off. The coldness in my voice was absolute. Not anymore. Go. Now. Kelly grabbed George's arm. Fine. Fine. We'll leave. But, George, this just proves my point. She's not capable of making her own decisions anymore. She pulled him out the door. George looked back at me one last time, his eyes begging me to what? To understand? To forgive him? I just stared. He turned and followed his wife. I listened to their footsteps on my porch, the one I'd built. I heard 2 car doors slam. I heard the sound of their tires pulling away. I stood there in the silence of my kitchen. The groceries were still in the trunk. The milk was probably getting warm. I didn't care. They thought I was old. They thought I was weak. They thought I was too big for my own life. They had no idea who they were dealing with. After the car door slammed, the silence in my kitchen was deafening. I finally went outside, my movements stiff, and pulled the grocery bags from the trunk. Milk, eggs, chicken. the simple, normal things of life. I put them away, my hands working on their own. I wasn't just angry. I was cold. It was a coldness that started deep in my bones. I sat down at the kitchen table, the one Edward and I bought at a yard sale, and refinished ourselves. I ran my hand over the oak grain, feeling the small groove where I'd once dropped a heavy pot. Kelly was right about one thing. The taxes were ridiculous. This neighborhood, Scottsdale, had ballooned around us. What was once a dusty lot on the edge of town was now prime real estate. But they didn't know the first thing about this land. I remember when Edward and I first stood here. It was 1975. There was nothing but dirt, tumbleweeds, and a whole lot of sun. We weren't rich. I was a nurse, working nights, and he was an engineer at the small plant. We had nothing but a beat-up Ford and a dream we'd sketched on a napkin. It's too far out. Felicia, my own mother had told me. There's nothing here. There's us, I'd told her, and we'll build the rest. And we did. We saved every single penny. We lived in a tiny, cramped apartment where you could hear the neighbors breathing. I packed Edward's lunch every day. No movies, no dinners out. Every spare dollar went into a savings account labeled the land. When we finally bought this lot, we couldn't even afford to build on it for another 2 years. We'd come out on weekends with a thermos of coffee and a blanket and just sit on the dirt. We'd point at nothing and say, the kitchen will go here, or that's where our son's bedroom will be. When we finally broke ground, we did most of the work ourselves. Not the big stuff, not the foundation. But the rest, that was all us. I learned how to frame a wall right alongside my husband. I learned how to lay tile. I remember one weekend we were trying to hang the drywall in the living room. It was heavy, awkward, and we were failing. I was covered in sweat and dust, on the verge of tears. And Edward, he just started laughing. He had this big, booming laugh. He said, well, Leisha, I guess we're just not very good at this. I looked at him, and I was so tired I wanted to quit. But then I saw the determination in his eyes, underneath the laugh. He wasn't giving up. I said, get another hammer. We're not good at it, yet. We finished that wall. It took us until 2 a.m, but we did it. And when we were done, we sat on the floor, drank warm beer, and admired the ugliest drywall job in Arizona. But it was ours. That's the woman I was. That's the woman I am. I didn't just carry on. When Edward passed 5 years ago, I grieved. My God, I grieved. Losing him felt like losing a part of my own body. The silence in this big house was a physical weight. For the first year, I'd still make 2 cups of coffee in the morning out of sheer habit, but I never once thought, this is too much for me. I never thought, I can't handle this. I'd handled a lot worse. I'd handled poverty. I'd handled skepticism. I'd handled loss. I paid the bills. I learned how to fix the leaky faucet myself. I climbed the ladder at 65 to clean my own gutters, though George had a fit when he found out. This house wasn't a burden. It was my partner. It was the legacy Edward and I had built together, and it was the fortress I had maintained on my own. It was proof that I was not a weak, frail, or incapable person. And that's what they had forgotten. That's what George, my own son, had forgotten. He saw a gray-haired woman who baked cookies and asked about his 401k. He'd forgotten the woman who'd hammered nails with bloody knuckles. Kelly, of course, never knew that woman. She just saw an old lady living in a house that was worth a lot of money. She saw an asset, an obstacle. I got up from the table and went to my desk, the one they had rifled through. The lock was simple, and I saw the tiny scratches on the metal. Kelly had been clumsy. I am not a dramatic person. I am a nurse, or I'm practical. I'm methodical. You don't panic when things go wrong. You assess the situation, you make a plan, and you execute it. And as I stood there, looking at the violation of my desk, I knew what I had to do. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my grief for incompetence. They were about to be reminded, in no uncertain terms, who Felicia Wedgeworth really was. After the big confrontation, a horrible, cold quiet settled in. Of course, George called. A few days later. He was crying. I'm not sure I'd heard my son cry since he broke his arm at age 12. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he said, his voice thick. She was stressed. "We've been worried about money. She worries about you. She didn't mean it like that." He gave me a dozen excuses, all of them weak as water. But he's my son, my only child. You don't just slam the door on your son's face and lock it forever, even when he deserves it. You just don't. I'd been a mother for 40 years. It's a hard habit to break. So I let him back in. I said, "We can talk, George." And when I let George back in, Kelly came with him. She was attached to his arm, looking smug, as if she'd won. She didn't apologize. She just said, "I'm glad you're ready to be reasonable, Felicia." And that's when the real invasion began. It wasn't loud, like that first day with Mr. Carter. It was quiet. It was like a slow, creeping rot. It started in my kitchen. Kelly would come over with George for Sunday dinner, and she'd walk right past me at the stove, open my pantry, and start reorganizing. "You'll be able to find things so much easier now, Felicia," she'd say, her voice bright and false, moving the cans of crushed tomatoes I'd kept on the left shelf for 20 years. She was helping, always helping. She helped me by moving my mother's china from the dining room hutch to a high-up cupboard, saying it was too fussy for the dining room. She helped by decluttering the guest bathroom, which meant she threw out my favorite lilac-scented soaps and replaced them with some kind of black, gritty charcoal stuff in a bottle that looked like a science experiment. Then she started having guests. Her guests. I came downstairs one Tuesday morning after sorting my linens to find 3 women I'd never seen before sitting in my living room. They were all in tennis outfits, holding coffee mugs. Kelly was at the counter, pouring from my wedding present silver coffee pot, like she owned it. "Oh, Felicia, there you are," she said, as if I were the one who was late. "Girls, this is George's mother, Felicia. Felicia, this is Marge, Barb, and Sue from the club." I just stood there, in my own house, being introduced like a distant relative who was visiting. The women smiled at me, a quick, dismissive little smile, before turning back to Kelly to talk about someone's tennis elbow. I wanted to tell them all to get out, but I looked at Kelly, who was laughing and tossing her hair, and I felt that same coldness. She was marking her territory. She was showing her friends what would soon be hers. I knew, just knew, that if I made a scene, I would be the one who looked crazy. So I just said, "Nice to meet you," and went back upstairs. I sat on my bed, my hands trembling. This was my home. This was my home. But the worst, the absolute worst, came a few weeks later. I had a doctor's appointment, just a routine checkup for my blood pressure. I was gone for maybe 3 hours. I came home, pulled into the driveway, and saw George's car. I was glad, for a second. Maybe he'd come alone. Maybe we could talk. I walked in the front door, and the first thing that hit me was the smell. A sharp, chemical smell. Paint. I turned the corner into my living room, and my heart stopped. It was gone. My living room was gone. The walls, which had been a warm, buttery yellow for 30 years, were now a flat, lifeless, ugly beige. My curtains, the heavy floral ones that Edward and I had spent a week picking out, were gone. In their place were thin, gray cloths that looked like they belonged in a hospital. And my chair, The big, overstuffed armchair with the worn arms, the one I sat in every single night to read, the one that was perfectly shaped to my body, the one where I'd rocked George to sleep as a baby. It was gone. In its place was a hard, modern-looking thing with skinny wooden legs. Kelly and George were standing in the middle of the room. George was holding a wet paintbrush. Kelly was beaming, her hands on her hips. "Surprise," she chirped, her voice echoing in the half-empty room. I'd been dying to update this space. It was so dated. She looked around, her eyes shining. "This room feels so much more open now, doesn't it, George?" George just mumbled, "Yeah, Kel, it's open." He wouldn't look at me. He just kept staring at the wall he'd been painting. My wall. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. She had taken my memories and thrown them out. She was erasing me. She was painting over my life with beige. Finally, I found my voice. It was just a whisper. "This is still my home, Kelly." She turned and actually waved her hand like she was shooing away a fly. "Oh, Felicia, don't be fussy. It's just stuff. You should be thanking me. This adds at least 10,000 to the resale value." The resale value. She said it right to my face. I looked at George. He was carefully wiping a drop of beige paint off his thumb. He was actively, physically helping her do it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tip over the paint can and ruin the rug. But I knew what would happen. I would be the hysterical old woman. I would be the one making a scene. Kelly would look at George with sad, patient eyes as if to say, See what I have to deal with. And my son would nod. I did what I had to do to survive. I bit my tongue so hard I tasted blood. I swallowed the rage. I told myself it was just paint. I was trying to keep the peace. I was trying not to lose my son. But that night, as I tried to sit on the new, stylish, and horribly uncomfortable sofa, I knew I'd already lost him. He was standing right there, watching his wife tear my life apart, and he was holding the paintbrush. That disrespected, it gnawed at me, it hollowed me out. And I knew that keeping the peace wasn't an option anymore. That beige paint was a wound. It was a statement. Every time I walked into my own living room, the smell of it, the dead, flat color of it, told me I didn't matter. It was a constant reminder that they saw my home, my life, as a thing to be updated and sold. I stopped trying to keep the peace. Peace was gone. Now it was just a Cold War, and I was the only one who hadn't realized it. My late husband, Edward, had a study. It was off the living room. A small room with built-in bookshelves where he kept his engineering texts and his old blueprints. It was his sanctuary. After he passed, I'd mostly kept the door shut. It was the one room I hadn't changed. The scent of his pipe tobacco and old paper still clung to the air. Or, at least, it used to. In the last few weeks, I'd noticed the door was always open. I'd hear Kelly in there, her voice sharp and businesslike on the phone. "Just taking a work call. Felicia," she'd yell out, not even looking up. George had moved a second monitor onto Edward's desk. "It's just easier to work from here, Mom," he'd said. "So I can keep an eye on things." They had taken his room. They had invaded the last truly private space in my home and turned it into their war room. It was a Tuesday night. They'd gone to some dinner with Kelly's colleagues. The house was finally, mercifully, quiet. I stood in front of that study door for a long time. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was afraid, but not of them. I was afraid of what they were doing. I was afraid of what I didn't know. That fear pushed me forward. I wasn't a guest. This was my house. I opened the door. Kelly's perfume hit me first. That sharp, expensive smell that covered everything. It had replaced the smell of pipe smoke. Edward's desk was buried under their life. George's laptop was open. A stack of Kelly's planners and notebooks sat where my husband's reading glasses used to be. I wasn't snooping. I was conducting an investigation. I was a homeowner checking on an infestation. I looked at the desk. I didn't know what I was looking for, but I knew I'd know it when I saw it. There was a pile of folders, not even put in a drawer. They weren't trying to hide. They just assumed I was too old or too stupid to look. The top folder was labeled simply House. My breath caught. I opened it, and there it was, the $600,000 appraisal. Not my old one, but a new, fresh copy they had ordered themselves. In the margins in Kelly's neat, sharp handwriting were notes. Solid starting point. Check comps. Ask Carter about staging. Underneath it, a call log. A printout from a cell phone. Kelly's number was at the top. And listed below were the names and numbers for 4 different real estate agencies. She wasn't just exploring. She was interviewing. She was negotiating. My stomach twisted. This was real. This was happening. I kept digging. I saw a stack of open mail, half stuffed back into their envelopes. They were addressed to Kelly at my address. She'd started having her mail sent here. I know you're not supposed to read other people's mail, but I was well past supposed to. They were credit card statements. One from a high-end department store. I unfolded it. The balance was $18,400. My hand flew to my mouth. I grabbed the next one. A Visa. The balance was $22,000. A third one, $15,000. She was drowning. It was over $50,000 in debt that I could see right on the desk. It all clicked into place. The desperation, the redecorating, the push to get me out. My house, my $600,000 home, wasn't just a convenient upgrade for them. It was a lifeline. It was a bailout. They were going to sell my life's work to pay for Kelly's shopping habit. I felt dizzy. I sat down in Edward's old leather chair. My chair now. My hand brushed against the desk blotter. There was a single piece of paper tucked underneath it. Just one, folded in 3. It looked official. I pulled it out. My fingers felt numb. It was a durable power of attorney. I read the words. It granted the agent full, unlimited power over the principal's finances, property, and medical decisions. The principal was me, Felicia Wedgeworth. The agent was Kelly Wedgeworth. It gave her the right to sell, mortgage, or otherwise dispose of any and all real property. It gave her access to my bank accounts, my retirement, everything. My eyes scanned down to the signature line at the bottom, and I saw my name, Felicia Wedgeworth. I stared at it. It was a good forgery. It was very, very good, but it wasn't mine. I always make my F with a straight back. This one was curved. I never looped the W. This one was looped. They had forged my signature on a document that gave them the legal right to steal everything I owned. The air left my body. This wasn't disrespect. This wasn't helping. This was a crime. This was a cold, calculated criminal act. They were trying to steal my house, my money, and my life, and they were using my son to do it. I sat there in the silence in my husband's office, and the woman who had been weeping over beige paint was gone. The hurt was gone. The sadness was gone. All that was left was ice. I carefully folded the paper. I didn't take it. That would be a mistake. They'd know I'd been there. Instead, I pulled out my phone. I laid the power of attorney flat on the desk. I took a clear, bright picture of the whole document, making sure the signature was sharp. I took pictures of the credit card bills. I took a picture of the call log. I took a picture of Kelly's notes on the appraisal. I put everything back, exactly as I had found it. I tucked the POA back under the blotter. I turned off the light. I closed the door. They thought they were dealing with a frail old lady. They thought they had backed me into a corner, But I wasn't cornered. I was gathering evidence. I wasn't just being disrespected. I was being robbed. And I was about to start playing dirty, too. I slept in my own bed that night, but I didn't rest. I was just waiting for the sun to come up. The woman who went to bed wasn't the same one who woke up. The fear and the shock were gone. I was a nurse again, and this was a disease. Kelly was a sickness in my family, and George was infected. You don't get emotional about a disease. You diagnose it, and you treat it. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 30 years. I went to a payphone. It felt ridiculous, standing on a street corner, holding that clunky plastic receiver. But I wasn't stupid. I wasn't going to make a call from my home phone, where they could check the records. I called a lawyer, a man my friend recommended, a specialist in estate law. I didn't give my name. I just said I had a hypothetical situation. My friend, I said, found a picture of a power of attorney. She believes her signature was forged by her daughter-in-law. The lawyer's voice was calm. A photograph isn't the original document, but if it's true, that's a serious felony. It's fraud. It's elder abuse. Your friend needs to come in, file a police report, and contest it immediately. I thanked him and hung up. I stood there by the road, watching the cars rush by. A police report. Lawyers. Contesting. It all sounded clean and right. But I knew, with a certainty that made me sick, that it wouldn't work. It would be my word, a 68-year-old woman's word, against Kelly's. Kelly, who was so bright and slick. She would cry. She would tell George the first was confused. She would say I'd signed it and forgotten. She'd say I was getting paranoid, that I was having episodes. And George, my son, he would want to believe her. He would be stuck in the middle, torn apart, and he would end up paralyzed. The legal documents were just paper. They were complicated. George would get lost in she said. No, the legal documents weren't enough. Not for George. If I was going to save my home, I had to first save my son from her. And to do that, I had to show him exactly who he was married to. I needed proof that was simple, brutal, and undeniable. I needed to show him her character. The title of my life story had just been written. They didn't know I also knew how to play dirty. I went to an electronics store, the kind with bright lights and teenagers in blue shirts who know everything about computers. I felt like a dinosaur walking in. "Excuse me," I said to a young man. "I need a camera, a hidden one, to watch my new puppy." "A nanny cam," he said, not even blinking. He led me to a wall of boxes. "This one looks like a phone charger. This one's an alarm clock. This one's a smoke detector." I bought the alarm clock. It was small, black, and cost more than I was comfortable with. I paid in cash. Back home, I unwrapped it like it was a bomb. I spent an hour in my bedroom, with the door locked, reading the tiny instruction manual. I figured out how to insert the little memory card. I figured out how to aim the lens. I felt a strange, cold thrill. I was good at this. I was good at methodical, precise work. Then I set the trap. I went to my jewelry box. I bypassed the diamonds. I bypassed my mother's pearls. I picked out a pair of sapphire earrings. They were Edward's first big gift to me after he got his promotion. They were valuable enough to be a temptation, and they were sentimental enough to make my blood boil when I thought about her touching them. I went into the study, their office. I put the new clock on the bookshelf, facing the desk. The lens was invisible. Then I took the sapphire earrings and I placed them on the desk right next to the keyboard, as if I'd taken them off while working and just forgotten. I looked at the setup. It was good, but was it enough? Kelly was in debt, but she was also arrogant. Maybe she'd think she was entitled to the earrings. I went and got my purse. I took out my wallet, and from it, I pulled 3 $100 bills. Cash I'd taken out for the groceries for the month. I folded them and put them in a plain white envelope. I left the envelope sitting on the corner of the desk, next to a pile of mail. I was baiting the hook. I didn't have to wait long. They came over that Friday for dinner. It was a tradition. Our family night, Kelly called it. I cooked the chicken I bought the day I first saw Mr. Carter. It felt appropriate. I smiled. I asked George about his work. I complimented Kelly on her new blouse. I was the perfect, sweet, slightly out of it old mother. I let my hand tremble a little when I poured the iced tea. After dinner, Kelly did exactly what I knew she would. She sighed. I've just got to send one quick email for work. Of course, dear, I said. You know where the office is. She walked into the study and shut the door. My heart was in my throat. I sat at the kitchen table across from my son. I talked to him about the weather. I talked to him about the rose bushes. Every part of my body was screaming. I could hear the faint murmur of her voice from the other room. After about 10 minutes, the door opened. She came out smiling. All done, she chirped. She didn't have the earrings on. She didn't mention them. She didn't mention the cash. She just picked up her wine glass and started talking about a new restaurant she wanted to try. They left an hour later. I hugged George. I let Kelly kiss my cheek. Her skin felt like ice. The second their car was out of the driveway, I locked the door and ran to the study. The earrings were gone. The envelope with the cash was still on the desk. I picked it up. It was empty. My hands were shaking, but not with fear. I unplugged the clock. I pulled the tiny memory card from the back. I went to my own computer, the old one in my bedroom, and pushed the card into the little slot. The file opened. I clicked play, and I watched. The video was clear. I saw Kelly walk in. I saw her sit down. She looked at the closed door. Then her eyes went right to the earrings. She picked one up. She held it to her ear, admiring herself in the dark computer screen. She looked at the door again. And then, fast as a snake, she slipped them into her pocket. Then, she saw the envelope. She picked it up, saw the cash, and looked at the door one more time. She pulled the $300 out, folded the bills, and tucked them into her bra. She tossed the empty envelope back on the desk. I watched it 3 times. The forged POA was her plan. This was her character. I saved the file. I copied it to a small USB drive, the kind you hang on a keychain, and I went to bed. I was playing dirty now. And the worst part, I was good at it. I had the evidence. I had the trap. Now, I just had to wait for the right moment to spring it. I let the silence sit for a whole week. I let them stew in it. I went about my life. I weeded the garden. I went to the grocery store. I even went to my monthly book club. On the outside, I was the same Felicia. On the inside, I was a general planning a campaign. I had the forged power of attorney photo. I had the video of her stealing my earrings and my cash. I had the truth. But just having the truth isn't enough. You have to know how to use it. On Thursday, I made the call. I called George's cell phone. George, honey, I said. I made my voice sound a little tired, a little sad. I know things have been tense, and I don't like it. I heard him sigh on the other end. I don't either, Mom. I really don't. I was wondering, I said, if you and Kelly would come for dinner this Saturday. A proper dinner. I'm making a pot roast. And I'd like to talk. I think it's time. The relief in his voice was so thick, I could have bottled it. Oh, Mom. Yes, of course. That's wonderful. We'll be there. What time? 7 o'clock, I said. And George, let's Let's make it a nice evening. No more fighting. I promise, Mom, he said, and I knew he meant it. He thought I was surrendering. He thought his old, confused mother was finally giving in. That Saturday, I spent all day preparing. I didn't just cook. I set a stage. I went to the dining room, and I opened the hutch. I took out my mother's china, the set Kelly had called fussy. I polished every piece. I took out the heavy silver flatware, the good crystal glasses. I ironed the linen tablecloth. I made the pot roast Edward had always loved with carrots and new potatoes. I baked an apple pie. The house filled with the smells of family, of tradition, of love. It was all a lie, but it was a necessary one. I put the little USB drive, the one with the video file, into the pocket of my apron. It felt heavy like a stone. At 7 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Kelly was standing there, beaming. She was wearing a new dress. She'd won. She was here to accept my surrender. She even handed me a bottle of wine, a cheap one, but it was the gesture that mattered. George just looked relieved. He kissed my cheek. Mom, it smells incredible. It's good to have you both here, I said, and my voice was perfectly steady. Come in, come in. Sit down. We sat in the living room, my living room with its ugly beige walls. I didn't serve appetizers there. I ushered them straight to the dining room. Kelly stopped when she saw the table. Oh, she said, her eyes flicking over the china. Well, aren't we fancy? It's a special occasion, I said, smiling. It feels like a turning point. Please sit. The dinner was agonizing, but I was in complete control. I asked Kelly about her club. I let her brag about some fundraiser she was planning. I let her talk, and I watched my son watch her. He looked proud. He looked happy that the two women in his life were finally getting along. I watched Kelly eat the food I had cooked. I watched her drink wine from my mother's crystal, and I thought about the video of her hand slipping into my jewelry box, her face hard and greedy. We finished the pie. George leaned back, patting his stomach. Mom, that was the best meal I've had in I don't know how long. I'm glad, honey, I said. I set my fork down. I folded my linen napkin and placed it on the table. This was it. I'm glad you both came tonight. I started, and my voice was soft, but it cut through the room. They both froze, their smiles fading. George, Kelly, I've been doing a lot of thinking. These past few months, they've been hard, but they've also been clarifying. I looked at George. You said this house was too big for me. He tensed. Mom, No, let me finish, I said. You were right. It is a lot to manage. All the paperwork, the taxes, the upkeep at my age. I've been so stubborn. I saw Kelly's eyes light up. A bright, hungry light. She put her hand on George's arm, her perfectly manicured nails pressing into his sleeve. She was trying to silently tell him, don't talk. Let her do this. I continued. I've been thinking a lot about my future, and I think it's time for us to make some decisions together as a family. Kelly couldn't hold back. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Oh, Felicia, of course. We're all in this together. She squeezed George's arm. I told George you'd see it our way. We just want what's best for you. We're a family. We're a team. George let out a long, slow breath. Mom, that's wonderful. We can help. We can look at those places I mentioned. We can handle all the paperwork, whatever you need. The paperwork, I said, nodding slowly. Yes, that's the most important part, isn't it? Making sure everything is handled legally. Exactly, Kelly said, leaning in. She was vibrating with the victory. Well, I said, I'm tired of fighting. I started to stand up. I think if you're both finished with dessert, we should go into the study. There are a few documents. I think we need to discuss. To make everything official. Kelly's smile was so wide it looked like it must have hurt her face. She thought I was going to sign. She thought I was going to hand her the keys to my entire life. That, she said, standing up and smoothing her dress, is the best idea you've had all year, Felicia. She led the way. She actually led the way, walking into Edward's study like she already owned it. George followed her, looking like a man who just had a mountain lifted from his shoulders. And I followed them both, my hand in my apron pocket, my fingers wrapped tight around that little piece of plastic and metal. The show was over. The real performance was about to begin. We walked into the study. My study. Kelly, full of confidence from the pie and wine, walked right past me and sat down in Edward's leather chair. Behind his desk, she put her hands on the armrests, as if she were a queen taking her throne. George, my son, just looked tired, but relieved. He leaned against the bookshelf, happy that the fight was finally over. I stood by the door, and for a moment, I just watched them. They had made this room theirs. They had made my home theirs. They thought they had won. Well, Kelly said, smiling, let's get this over with. What documents are we talking about? We can call Mr. Carter on Monday. We could, I said. I walked over to the desk. George's laptop was still sitting there, open. You've both been working so hard in here. I thought I'd use your computer. Keep things simple. Kelly's smile faltered. Just a little. I touched the mouse pad. The screen flickered to life. I had prepared a folder on the desktop. I'd named it Future Plans. First, I said, I wanted to see the paperwork you'd already started. I clicked, and the first image opened. It was the photo of the $600,000 appraisal. George squinted. Mom, what is that? That, I said, is the appraisal Kelly ordered, with her notes in the margin. Solid starting point. You were very confident, Kelly. Kelly's face went from smug to hard. I was just getting a number for us. For our discussion. Were you? I clicked again. The phone log appeared. 4 different real estate agencies. Kelly, you were shopping for a commission, not starting a discussion. Mom. George pushed off the bookshelf. What is this? You're attacking her. We told you we were just trying to help. Help, I repeated. I looked right at my son. Is that what you call this, George? I clicked the last file in the folder. The big one. The picture of the power of attorney. The one with my forged signature. I zoomed in, right on the name. Felicia Wedgeworth. George stared at the screen. He was confused. It's the power of attorney. You signed it. See? We can handle everything. Did I, George? I asked. My voice was quiet. Look at it. Look at the F. When, in your entire life, have you ever seen me make my F with a curve? When have you ever seen me loop my W? George's blood drained from his face. He looked from the screen to me and then to Kelly. Kelly exploded out of the chair. She's lying. She's paranoid. Felicia, you did sign it. You signed it last month and you've forgotten. George, I told you this would happen. I told you her mind was going. She's confused. George looked at me, his eyes wide with panic and, worst of all, doubt. Mom, it's been a stressful time. Maybe you did forget. I let the silence hang in the air. This was it. The moment I knew would come. I shook my head, slowly. My mind. Yes, that's what you were counting on, wasn't it, Kelly? That I was just a confused old woman. That I'd be an easy person to frame. I turned to her. I was afraid you'd lie. I was afraid you'd say exactly that. I reached into my apron pocket. I pulled out the small black USB drive. The problem with a forged document, I said, is that it's just, he said, she said. I knew you'd rely on George being stuck in the middle. So I decided to see what else you were capable of. Kelly's eyes locked on the USB drive. Her face, for the first time, showed pure animal fear. What is that? She whispered. This, I said. I walked past her and plugged it into the side of the laptop. It's just a little something I picked up. You know what a nanny cam is, don't you, Kelly? You're so good with computers. I clicked on the file. I hit play. And I turned the laptop screen so all three of us could see. The room was dead silent. We watched the video of Kelly in this very room, walking in and shutting the door. We watched her eyes dart to the desk. We watched her pick up my sapphire earrings, my husband's first gift to me, and hold them to her ear, admiring herself in the dark screen. And then we watched her slip them into her pocket. We watched her see the envelope. We watched her pick it up, look inside, and pull out the $300 bills. We watched her, clear as day, fold the cash and tuck it deep into her bra. I heard a sound, a small, choking sound, like someone had been punched in the stomach. It was George. He was staring at the screen. He wasn't breathing. Kelly started to shake. It's a trick. She set me up. Felicia, you tempted me. It was a test. That's not fair. I was going to give them back. I was just holding them. And the money, I was going to use it to buy you groceries. You set me up. It was the confession that finally broke my son. He turned to his wife. His face was white. He didn't yell. He whispered, You took them. He looked at her, his eyes tracing her face, as if he'd never seen her before. The credit cards. The debt. Oh my God, Kelly. The debt. This was never about helping her. This was about you. You were going to sell my mother's house to pay for clothes. Kelly grabbed his arm. George, baby, listen to me. She's twisting you. She's a manipulative old. Don't, I said. My voice was like a whip. Don't you dare finish that sentence. I calmly reached over and pulled the USB drive from the laptop. I closed the screen. Get your things, Kelly. She stared at me. What? I looked at my son, who was still frozen, his world in pieces. George, your wife is a thief. She is a forger. She is not welcome in this house ever again. You can go with her or you can stay, but she is leaving. Now, George. Kelly shrieked, her nails digging into his arm. Don't let her do this. Don't let her do this to us. He ripped his arm out of her grasp. He couldn't even look at her. He just stared at the blank computer screen. Just go, Kelly. Please. Just go. Her face changed. The panic and the fake tears disappeared. And all that was left was a hatred so pure it was shocking. She looked at me. I stood up straight. I wasn't the tired, sad old woman from the dinner table. You thought I was just some old woman. I said, my voice low and clear. You thought you could paint over my life, steal my memories, and then sign away my future. You thought I was weak. I took a step toward her. I may be older, but I am not weak. Now, get out of my house. You will never take what's mine without a fight. She grabbed her purse from the desk, her hands shaking with rage. She stormed out of the study. She didn't just leave, she fled. A few seconds later, the front door slammed. So hard, I thought the glass would break. And then silence. Just me and my son, standing in the wreckage. He finally looked up at me, his eyes full of a shame and a heartbreak so deep I could barely stand to look at it. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He just broke. He covered his face with his hands and began to sob. I stood there, in the quiet of my husband's study, and I watched my son weep. He cried like a little boy, his shoulders shaking. He was crying for his broken marriage. Yes, I could see that. But I think he was also crying because, for the first time, he truly saw himself. He saw the weakness. He saw the man who had held the paintbrush while his wife painted over his mother's life. He saw the man who was so desperate to keep the peace that he had willingly blinded himself to the truth. I didn't rush to comfort him. I didn't pat his back. The time for that was over. The woman who would have coddled him, who would have made excuses for him, was gone. After a long minute, his sobs quieted down. He wiped his face with his sleeve, not looking at me. "Mom," he whispered, his voice thick. I don't know what to say. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know about the paper. I didn't know about the money. You didn't want to know, George," I said. My voice wasn't angry. It was just true. That's the real problem. You saw her redecorating my house. You saw her disrespect. You felt it, but you chose to believe the lie because the truth was too difficult. He just nodded, accepting it. The fight was gone. What do I do now?" he asked. He looked small. "You go home," I said, "or to a hotel. I don't know. And you figure out who you want to be. You figure out if you're a man who stands by a woman who commits a felony, or if you're the man I thought I raised. That's your choice, not mine." He nodded again. He looked around the room, at the desk, at the chair. He understood, finally, what he had helped to violate. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. He walked out of the study, and he left. He didn't look back. And I was alone in my house, truly alone, for the first time in months. And the silence was wonderful. I walked into the living room. That horrible, flat, lifeless beige was still on the walls. But it looked different to me now. It wasn't an insult anymore. It was just paint. Paint that could be covered. I sat down on that hard, stylish sofa Kelly had picked, and I thought about what I had done. The nanny cam, the trap, the earrings, and the cash. Was it a nice thing to do? No, it wasn't. A part of me, the part that was a nurse for 40 years, felt a little cold. I'm a 68-year-old woman. I'm supposed to be softer. I'm supposed to be the cookie-baking grandmother. But what I realized sitting there in the silence is that kindness is not weakness. And being nice is not a requirement when someone is trying to steal your life. They mistook my age for incompetence. They saw my gray hair and my quiet days, and they thought I was a finished chapter. They thought I was a problem to be managed, a burden to be helped into a small room in Glendale. What they forgot, what my own son forgot, was that I am the woman who built this house with my own 2 hands. I'm the woman who buried a husband and did not fall apart. I have a spine made of steel, and it just took this betrayal to make me find it again. I'm telling you this story. I'm telling you because I know I'm not the only one. I know there are so many of you out there, women of my age, who have felt invisible, who have felt people talk over you at the dinner table, people who make decisions for you about your life as if you're not even in the room. They see us, they see our wrinkles and our quiet ways, and they think we are weak. They think we are too much trouble. They think our lives are too big for us. They want us to go quietly. They want us to hand over the keys to the lives we spent a lifetime building. I am here to tell you, do not go quietly. We are not weak. We are not finished. We are the generation that survived. We have a strength in our bones that they haven't even begun to test. We don't give up. We rise. We fight. And we protect what we've worked for. My story, it had a hard ending, but it's my ending. George and we're talking. It's slow. It will take time. But he's in therapy. He's trying. Kelly is gone. I'm getting my living room repainted next week. Back to the warm, buttery yellow. Now, I want to hear your story. Have you ever felt your family take advantage of you? Have you ever felt disrespected or pushed aside just because of your age? And here's the big question. The one I still turn over in my own mind. Do you think my trap was justified, or did I go too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. This is our community. This is where we share, and this is where we remind each other that we are not alone. If this story felt real to you, if it touched a part of your own life, please like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and be sure to subscribe to the channel. We have a lot more to talk about. Lastly, remember to download this wonderful book called Coming Back to Myself, 60 Liberating Truths to Find Yourself Again. You'll find it in the pinned comment below. Now, if you like this story, go ahead and click on the next video appearing on your screen, because in it is a story of betrayal and revolt like you've never seen before on Her Kindle Stories. Thank you for listening.